Hey guys, it's me, Joseph. You should let me in so I can give you a review of Sinners. I feel like it'd be a little weird to do it from this distance, so just like let me into the room so I can give you a review of Sinners. You gonna just make me stand out here? Like, invite me into the room. Come on. How am I supposed to give you a review if you're not gonna let me in the room? What's up, guys? My name is Joseph, and today we are going to be reviewing Ryan Coogler's new movie, Sinners. Real quick, please be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It goes such a long way in helping the channel. Sinners is Ryan Coogler's new film. It is a 1930s period piece following twin brothers, both played by Michael B. Jordan, who are coming back from Chicago, where they kind of operate within the underbelly, but ultimately they are good people who just want to take care of their community. And it follows their story when they come back home and try to establish a juke joint. But evil tries to stop them from doing that. Big evil. Like big farm. Like, this is big evil. This isn't, I don't know what I'm getting at here. With that, I think I'm going to go into the spoiler section. Just like the movie, I'm going to kind of just bounce around. Not that the movie is like poorly made, but it's doing a lot. So my thoughts are kind of all over the place as well. The first thing, which is kind of like the theme for this video, this review, is that this is the kind of movie that we need to see more of. Either studios or just directors, by their own volition and resources, deciding that they're going to take their talent and their flair and their passion and their style and their vision and just have the freedom to create something absolutely bombastic and wild and fresh and original and specific to what they want to tell. We need more movies like this. Movies where they take massive swings and, again, just throw everything at the wall and create something that hasn't been seen before. Coogler literally just flexes on the audience for 2.5 hours. But to get into my specific thoughts, I always love to try to take an angle on films about the messaging or what I think it was trying to say. And I would say, I feel like if the film has a thesis, I think it's one of two things. One of them centers around the very final scene where Sammy, as an old man, is talking to Stack and Mary's vampires. And he's basically saying, like, that night where everything went down, at least once a week, thinking about it paralyzes me with fear. And yet I also think that before the sun went down, that was the best day of my life. And I thought that was such an interesting place to leave the movie off on, because throughout the whole film, it's doing so much and it's saying so much, but it's not really packaged as a movie that's saying a lot. Like, a lot of times, a 1930s period piece is pretty strictly about, racism, essentially, or acknowledging that the systems that were in place that for the longest time in mainstream media were glorified were actually destructive and destabilizing and traumatizing for a lot of people whose stories were just never told. And this movie certainly has aspects of that, and it is all tied into the ideas. But again, it's just like packaged. It's all packaged into a fun vampire action, insane movie. Like, since it was packaged in this very like over the top kind of actiony fun movie, I was trying to like grasp on what the central theme of this movie would be. Like, what is it all kind of tied around? And it wasn't until that very last scene where it all kind of clicked, where taking the events of that day as kind of a microcosm of whether you want to say just life in general, or life for marginalized peoples, or specifically life for, the Black community or racial minorities in the United States in the 30s, any one of those things. I think that idea of this one day being both the best and the worst day of my life, the way that I kind of took that is, despite, being forced to go through such trauma and such fear and being victims to such hate and vitriol and oppression, despite all of those things, those communities are still full of love and of family and of art and passion and talent and ambition and ideas. And when that line hit, it kind of clicked, at least for me, that I think that that's kind of what the movie was really getting at the whole time. It even kind of mirrors a story that Slim's character was saying, where he's reminiscing on a story about him and some of his friends that all got to be, to play as a band, as like a touring band. And then that beautiful thing ends up being the reason that one of his friends is killed, because a bunch of white people, Klan members, I think it was, saw a black man with all of this cash and made up a story that he had murdered a white man to get the money. That story mirrored with that kind of last line of like, this was the best day until it was the worst day. And it's just like, again, it's not saying any of these things outright, but it's just like putting these stories and these ideas in your head of like this, life and these communities have experienced such hatred and such trauma, and yet also still want to live and want to experience life and live life to the fullest and do things that make them happy. And I think that is kind of the core idea of this film, or at least that's really what I kind of took away from it, which is just like an awesome idea. And then what else? There's also, the movie has so much religious subtext, or not even subtext, but just commentary. I mean, the opening scene, happens in a church, and the entire movie there's talk about like, being saved, God, the role of religion in people's lives or in community, and how some people think it does save and can keep people on the right path and can keep them from becoming kind of immoral. And then other people believe that it is essentially pointless, that despite, the idea of it sounding nice, at the end of the day, like I think it was Smoke's character basically saying like, I've been around the world, I've seen all kinds of people, and I've never seen anything spiritual. All I've seen is power. And I've seen people abuse power, and I've seen the way that people get power. There's a lot of, again, things where it's not saying it outright, but I'm just left wondering, like, what did Sammy running away from the church rather than falling back into it say? Like, is that, did he reject religion as a whole? Does he feel like it was the cause of the problem? Because how could it have happened? Is it hinting at a message of like, a lot of people will say, if I'm supposed to believe in prayer, then how could these terrible things happen? Which, again, is something that's mirrored earlier in the movie with Annie's character, where she is telling Smoke that she prayed for him, and Smoke is like, well, why didn't the prayers work for your son? And she doesn't have an answer. She just says, I don't know. It worked for you. My prayers worked for you. And so, again, it's like a question of how are you supposed to have faith when your whole life is filled with pain and trauma despite prayer? But I also don't think it necessarily does symbolize that. It might just be about, true freedom not being able to be possible within the dogma of organized religion. Religion is supposed to be about spreading love, but a lot of times it ends up being a way to kind of repress people or spread more hatred, which is, again, something that's mirrored later in the movie through the vampire who hears Sammy speaking to God, trying to say a prayer, trying to save himself from his fate of almost being killed. And then the vampire talking about how the first time he heard those prayers, it was when Christians came to Ireland and slaughtered his people and basically said, if you don't convert, we're going to kill you all, which is something I've always found kind of interesting, that, many of the places that are Christian today are only Christian because generations ago, their ancestors were told, convert or die. And so, again, I'm not exactly sure what that is getting at, or more so, there are so many things that can be getting at, but the movie doesn't say them outright. It just has them all kind of floating around, mixed in, again, packaged in a freaking vampire story, like in an action vampire story about trying to open a juke joint. I haven't even gotten to the juke joint aspect of this yet, and like music and the amazing musical elements of this film. Like, it's crazy. But going back to Sammy leaving the church, again, I don't know if maybe this is trying to say that only you can save yourself. Maybe, sure, religion can work for some people and it can really save them, but if you know that you won't be saved by religion, then how will you just force yourself into that role? Like, to Sammy, music was the only thing that could save him, or the only thing that he really wanted to pursue, and there shouldn't be anything viewed as immoral about that. Another element to this movie, just kind of talking about like all of the things that it's doing, is it's so interesting. Like, the characters are also interesting because, though I wouldn't necessarily say, and this is going to sound backhanded, but I don't mean it this way, though I wouldn't necessarily say the characters have the most depth. Like, they aren't really given a whole lot of, I guess, specificity in terms of their backstories, but they are given each a lot of backstory, which was just another very interesting thing about this movie. Like, in almost every new scene, there's a new dynamic that's being introduced, whether it's whether it's Annie and Smoke, whether it's Mary and Stack, or Sammy and his cousins, or Sammy flirting with Perline, but Perline also being married, and Sammy being the son of a pastor, and of course everything with the Smokestack brothers past and their criminal history, and Stack leaving Mary out of worrying for her safety so much that he ends up hurting her in the process of trying to protect her, and Annie's child dying, and the whole almost it almost felt like a spy movie where you kind of you find the perfect crew, oh, we need the code cracker, we need the muscle, we need the whatever, where they're going around and picking up all of these old band members or musicians that they used to know, and again then getting stories about the specific musicians past, and then getting more context about the town that they're in, or just the United States in general, and how just because you go to a northern city doesn't mean that you're going to have a completely different experience. Where again, all of a sudden it's okay, so we've introduced all this stuff and they're just trying to establish the juke joint and all of this. And that's all before what this movie is. It's just insane. This movie is so awesome. Getting back to what I was saying, even though this movie doesn't necessarily give so much depth and specific explanation to any one of these things, it does put weight into all of these things. All of these things do affect the characters and affect their decisions, and again put weight into where what you want for the characters and what you hope to see them get by the end of the film. And it makes it really sad when they all start to die. That was another thing I wasn't expecting. I don't know why, but I was there's no way they're gonna start killing all these awesome people, right? We love them so much and they're just gonna start dying. But yeah, this movie just does so much in all of its scenes. It doesn't pump the brakes. Jumping back to what I think a potential theme or thesis of this film would be, obviously the first one was kind of how the same day ended up being the best and worst day of his life. But I think perhaps another theme of this movie is just the movie just as a whole deals a lot with morality and I guess the gray area of morality and what makes someone a good person. The Smokestack brothers are obviously criminals, and yet the reason behind their criminal action is in order to uplift their community, or even if it isn't as selfless as uplifting their community, which, the movie does show that it is about, even if it's not about that, it's also not hard to see how their criminal activity is a result of the environment that they have grown up in, being raised by an abusive parent, but then also, of course, being treated as less than human, and being raised in a world where they are going to be seen as criminals regardless, basically. So why not try to lift themselves out of that? If the whole world is going to be against them, then why not be up against the whole world, basically? And that's one way that the movie kind of breaches the idea of morality and what makes someone a good person. One of the last scenes of the movie is Smoke murdering 20 some odd people, but those 20 some odd people are Klan members. Does that make him a bad person? I don't think anyone will say so. This movie asks questions about if, religion is moral, or more so if not fully adhering to religion is immoral, which I don't think the movie tries to make that claim. The Sammy's dad, the pastor, kind of has some pretty closed-minded opinions about the kind of people who don't go to church, and sure, maybe in some cases they are slackers who don't care about the community or their families or themselves even, and just want to waste their days away with alcohol. But at the same time, it's incredibly reductive to look at those people who are struggling and say, well, just because they are not capable of adhering to religious doctrine means that they're bad people. And the movie is very clear that no, these people work hard every single day still, and they just need some way to take the pain away, take the edge off, have some fun, let loose, express themselves, be playful. It's asking if personal choice, personal freedom is immoral. Is Sammy a bad person because he'd rather be playing at a juke joint than going to services? No, absolutely not. Is Slim a bad person because all he wants for himself is to play music and get drunk? No, absolutely not. If that's all he wants for himself and he's not harming anyone, you can say that's not the healthiest lifestyle, but it's also the lifestyle that he has managed to carve out for himself in a world that is very repressive. Stack ran away from Mary because he wanted to protect her. Is he immoral for that? That one, maybe a little less gray area there, just because it is a story we have seen before of oh, I hurt you because I wanted to protect you, where it's y'all probably could have talked about that if you really wanted. But again, it's not just, oh, he left, and the reason he left is unjustified. Even Mary seems to understand by a certain point, at least what he was getting at. Basically, this movie just gets at the point that people disappoint each other or seem immoral to one another only because that person has their own judgment and their own opinion on what makes someone moral. And so who gets to decide what makes someone moral? Obviously, there are certain things that are objectively bad, of course, but this movie kind of relishes in those gray areas and in that nuance of, are Sammy and Perline bad because Perline is having an affair? It doesn't say it outright, but I think at one point Perline asks if Sammy is going to pay, and so it's entirely possible that she has an agreement with her husband that she is going to have sex with other people in order to, as a means of income. Or she hasn't had that conversation with her husband, but she is still using it as an extra means for income so that she can have a better life for herself and for her husband, living in the gray areas. And this obviously is not something I think the movie is actually saying, but is the main vampire wanting to turn Sammy into a vampire so that Sammy can conjure the spirits of his loved ones who passed. Is that entirely immoral? Obviously, he is the villain and what he's doing is horrible, so yes, it is bad to be doing all of this. But still, it gives a reason. Like, this is someone who experienced something so traumatic that it turned them into a demon, basically. And they have spent all of these hundreds of years trying to find someone who can bring their family back. Like, hey, there's worse reasons to go around killing a bunch of people. Is the Smokestack Brothers' choice to kill their dad bad? Their dad abused them and they were children. Like, it's doing a lot. Again, it's like saying so much, and though it doesn't like land on anything, it is so fascinating to have all of this wrapped up in this movie that, again, is a vampire movie. And man, I haven't even started talking about like the technical elements of this film yet, or the specific world building and lore that it does. I mean, there are stories about, people who can create music so true that it can conjure spirits. It's just such an interesting, fascinating idea. And another thing that's just like kind of affirming about the power of art, like the truly awesome power of art, otherworldly power of art. And I thought that, yeah, like the specific lore of this film, kind of how the vampires also just want to make music. Like, I was trying to figure out what this movie's version of like vampire rules are. Like, it has a lot of the standard ones of like, garlic, silver, stakes, holy water. They have to ask before they enter a house. But then it was also talking about how like vampires in this universe trap the person's soul within the body, never able to go, into the next life. And they were saying how the vampires kind of take over the body, and yet at the same time, we also saw the vampires retain a lot of personality and also receive like a new ideology once they did become vampires. Like, as much as I think you can say that the vampires talking about like, oh, we just want to make everyone happy, we just want to make everyone like love each other, being kind of a persuasion tactic or a bit manipulative. It is also something that within this time frame and within this world of the movie, if that is something that they genuinely believe, then that isn't the worst ideology. Like, that's not a fully evil ideology. It seemed like the vampires genuinely loved to play music still. Where, again, maybe that was just a kind of a persuasion tactic to try to get invited in or to try to like get people to let their guard down. But at the same time, I feel like the main vampire, what was his name? Remick? Probably Remick. There's the scene where he's doing, I don't know what it would be called exactly, but some Irish song, I'm assuming from the time where he was alive as a human, basically. And, why would you sing that? It's like a whole moment of community where they're all singing and dancing and playing instruments together. And basically what I'm getting at, I think, is like this movie's specific world building of these supernatural beings being conjured by music is just like it's a sick idea. It's so cool. Oh, and then like the Native American characters kind of knowing what's up in this world. Different people kind of know about these different spirits and are aware of the danger of them or the presence of them and different ways to combat them. It just builds a very rich and deep and wonderful world all the way throughout the movie. I thought it was some great world building, some great lore. I'm kind of getting to the end of my notes, but I think just the one other thing that I just want to touch on is that one scene, Sammy's song that he wrote about his father, and it's this like crazy, amazing one shot that just like tracks all the way throughout the juke joint. And as the song progresses, we see basically the music is so true that it's just conjuring spirits from the past and present who understood the soul altering power of music. That was one of the most like beautiful, amazing scenes that again is just like reaffirming of like, man, this is why I go to the damn movies. This is why this is the art form that I want to pursue the rest of my life. It is literally scenes like this that make me fall in love with movies all over again. I think that's going to do it for this one, though. I am definitely going to try to catch this one again within the next week or two, maybe even a third time. Like, I had such a blast with this. Again, I can't recommend enough for everyone to go see this. Hopefully, if you're watching through this late into the review, then you have already seen it. Otherwise, you just ruined one of the best movies of the 2020s. Is that too bold to say? I don't know. That might be bold to say. Like, I just saw it. But I think you get the point. Like, fantastic movie. Yeah, that'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Again, please like, comment, and subscribe. Next Friday, I will do a review of this movie, The Legend of Ochi, which was kind of like a Sundance Film Festival darling this year. Kind of has mixed reviews, but I'm holding out hope it'll be good. And then the Wednesday after that, I'm going to do my third episode of In Theaters Now on The Accountant 2, Until Dawn, and something else. I can't remember. It's really late. I got out of the movie super late. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. I need an outro.